The reality, the naturalities of it. It's the aspect of the attempt to put in a position the state of things not as they are. But it is the deviation from doing so in the context of there being an ability to put yourself in the actual potential to be related to what is real. So what that really means, it means the sense that the people who attempt to do so in such a manner, the people that attempt to facilitate their own slide into the demise at the expense of you, are doing so. What it is, it's like someone drowning and grasping and trying to grab you and drag you down with them, and that type of desperation, that type of spreading around of the misery of the pit. It's a dangerous fucking thing because they do so at the expense. They do their suffering spills out of themselves at the expense of the people around them, and they can't be saved because they are actually putting themselves in the position that makes them go to those places at all. And so it's like it has to be the awareness of the circumstance, the awareness of the proclivity of certain types of entities to be and this is where people start to talk about demons. This is where people start to talk about supernaturalities. This is where people start to talk about possessions, because it's like, what is the actual behestion? What is the premise of this behavior? Because you look at the individual and there really is no rationality to the aspects of how this manifests itself, because when you consider it, it does not have a benefit to the purveyor, to the user of this behavioral paradigm. The utilizer of this constitutional paradigm of existence does not benefit. So you have to question, who is the behestion? What is the premise of the behavior? Because it cannot be understood to be anything other than demonic, because at the sense of their being, why would somebody do something that is bad for them? Why would you do something that is bad for you? That is really the question. But it's at the same time, it's paradigmatically a somewhat of an antithetical question, because the people obviously don't know. And it can be hard to even decipher, even understand why it's being done. Why is it being done in the sense of what is the rationality? Not only what is the not only is what is the rationality to the behavior, but what is the understanding towards it. And so it's like you're putting into the premise of the engagement a sense of the ability to engender some sort of outcome. But this is actually, it's interesting because there's no way that there is a predication upon the intentionality of who you would perceive to be the entity involved or engaged in purporting this set of behavioral mechanisms that result in the outcome. Because why would somebody do something that's bad for them at the end of the day? And now you want to frame this as, oh, well, they're scared of things. Fear makes them do it. They're trying to avoid something, but it actually gives this result. They do things in the wrong way because of the wrong way orientation of things. I don't know about that. I don't quite know about that. And I think this is where people in the ancient times and in the near ancient eras used to talk about demons. They used to talk about possessions of some subterfugal world, some world outside of the perceptionality and the materialism that we inhabit. Because, I mean, how do you explain? Why would somebody do something that's bad for them? Why would you do something that's bad for you? Why would you continually attempt to manipulate reality in a way that obfuscates it and puts you in a position where you continually drag yourself into a positionality in the world? You get negative results, you push people away because of lies, you deviate from the truth in order to, quote unquote, protect yourself, but in reality it just digs you deeper and deeper into the results of being a dishonest person, which is always going to be a negative externality, because deviating from telling the truth is only going to result in negative portensions from that, because you are going further and further away from what is real. You're going further and further away into the lie. You're going further and further away into the disconnect. You're going further and further away into the distinction in which you will will, of course, pay the price for doing so because you are separating yourself from what is real. You're separating yourself from what is true. This is why telling the truth is better than telling a lie, even at the fundamental aspect of the understanding of truth, that a child understands truth. Did you put your hand in the cookie jar and take a cookie? No, I did not. It's a lie, and it's not bad because you get punished. It's bad because it goes against the fundamental nature of the universe. It goes against the fundamental nature of reality. You are spiting God. You are spitting in the face of God when you tell a lie. And this is why we don't punish our children for telling lies because we want them to be punished for not doing what we say. We punish our children for telling lies because they need to learn that telling lies is bad at the level of the moral, at the level of the spiritual, because it goes against the truth of reality, it goes against the nature of reality, and you will pay a price for that. So this is just really goes to the premise. Why do people do things that are bad for them? Why do people do things that end up bad for them? And you have to understand, why would somebody do something that is bad for them? And you start to ask the question, because the answer is they wouldn't. And people do know what they're doing. People do know what they're doing. So this is where we have, and I hate to do it, we have to invoke demons. We have to invoke, and you can take the term as you want. You can take the understanding of the terminology as you want, but we have to invoke some sense of extra material, supra real. We have to invoke the idea, we have to invoke the conceptuality, the conceptualization of super real entities that exist in a realm outside, not outside of our own, but outside of our full perception, and that act through us, that have an inhabitation within us. Because this is what I'm saying, how can you explain somebody doing something bad for them? Why would you do something that is bad for you? Why would you say something that's not true? Because that's not going to be good for you. Why would you do that? Well, you can say, well, somebody doesn't know, or they're scared, or they just have a bad habit. I don't think so, because I think that people know what they're doing. People fundamentally do understand what their fucking actions are. You understand what is real. All humans are a part of the truth. All humans are a part of the greater reality. We understand when we're deviating from it. We do it anyways. And the question is why? Why are you doing something that is bad for you? Why are you trying to pretend things are one way and they're not the other? Well, what you're doing is you're dragging people down to hell with you. But not only that, you're going to, when you try to create a false reality, you're attempting to drag people into your personal hell that you have created. Now, I don't think a person would create a hell on their own. Why would you create a hell on your own? Why would you do it? You wouldn't. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that a human being born on this planet, living in this world, would do something that is fundamentally bad for them. Now, this brings us into the question, why would they do it? And the answer has been for the longest time, it's a possession by a demon, to be very blunt. And you can conceptualize that in many ways. There's many ways to understand what that really means, but what it really, it's the taking on of an energy of a supernatural force that works through the human race and works through the individuals and entities that we believe to be composing the human race. And it takes hold of their behaviors and modulates them, or gets into their psyche and gets into their experience in a way where they can influence outcomes. Because the question is, and the question remains, why would somebody do something that is bad for them? Why? I can't think of an answer. I can't think of a good enough answer, because the answer that they don't know is bullshit, because they do know. People know when they're doing the wrong thing, because everyone has a connection with the truth, because we're all part of the truth. And people you have a habit of doing the wrong thing. No. Why would you have a habit of doing something that is bad for you? It doesn't make sense. You wouldn't do something that is bad for you in the first place. It's not a decision that should be made, because why would you do something that will have a negative outcome for you? It doesn't make sense. The only thing you can come up with is there is something outside of the human being, something outside of our world, something outside of what we consider to be a human entity is involved in some way. There's some effect where how do you convince, or in what circumstance could a human being do something that is bad for them on a behavioral level? And I'm not talking about demon possession, like, contorting your neck and some, a horror movie, some sort of, priest coming into a small town in Louisiana and attempting to do an exorcism. Maybe I am, but what I'm saying, and all that I'm really saying, is that the nature of humanity, the nature of humanity's engagement with reality, should not come along with doing things that are. Why would you do something that is bad for you? Why would you lie? Why would you attempt to misrepresent the truth? Why would you do that? Well, I don't think that you would. I think that there's something else at play. I think there's something else at work. There are other beings. There are other forces at work, and you can consider them as demons. You can consider them. But the reality is this has to be considered on the spiritual level, because, and this is the thing too, it's very misleading. Why would somebody pursue a life of material excess and degradation of your soul at the selling of yourself for the marketplace of culture to sacrifice you? Why would somebody hoard wealth and step on the skulls of the oppressed and the impoverished on their way to riches? That's not a behavior that's going to be good for you. You're damning your soul. You're damning your soul for eternity by doing that. Why would you do it? Why would you step on the skulls of the oppressed, and why would you crush the peasants into poverty for 500 years if you were not possessed by a demon? Why would a human being do that? Why would you turn against God? Why would you pick up the name of God and use it as a cudgel to beat the living life out of your fellow human beings? You wouldn't do that, because why would you turn against the truth like that? Why would you turn against the good like that? It's justification for demons. There has to be something else at work. I don't see, the high school girl tells a lie that damns her friend for the next 10 years, and the oligarch crushes the working class to build a vacation home. It's the same thing. There are demons at play. There must be. Otherwise, why would these actions be taken? Why would humanity turn against itself at its own detriment? The punishment is metered out at the cost of our soul. Why would you do it to yourself? Why would you turn against God? There must be a force. There must be a secondary force. The spiritual realm plays, and context of the rationality actually demands there to be an explanation. It demands there to be a conflagration. It demands there to be something that gives up its excesses and exposes itself for what it is in reality, not for your conceptualization of it, not for your perceptualization of it, not for the ideation of what it could be, for what it really is and what really stands when you pull back the mask. When you pull back the mask, who stands in the fore? Who asks for more when they already have enough and their neighbor starves? Well, I do not think it is your fellow man. I do not think humanity to be so low. I think there are greater forces, greater in the sense of them being beyond our realm, but working within us and working through us. And these are not always positive. I think the human being is an angel within himself. I think God is found in the heart of every man, but the heart of every man is also corrupted by some force that comes out of the fore and finds itself within us and finds itself within and among us. And it is our duty to stand here and bleed out the truth so that these demons can be cast off to the place in which they came, and we can find eternity again. We can find nirvana again as a race and a species of beings that are here on this planet and on this earth. And we stand and we praise what is true and we praise what is righteous, and we turn not away from ourselves but towards ourselves and towards the truth. And only in this place and only in this state can we find the reality, and we cast aside the things that have been false, and we cast aside the things that turn against us, as we will not turn against ourselves, because we believe in ourselves and we believe in what we are, and we believe in humanity because it's worth believing in. And I do not believe my fellow man would turn against himself. And therefore, we have a justification for demons. And I invoke a holy war on this day. I invoke a holy war against the dark forces. And I will commit myself to this, because there is no committal that is greater. There is no committal that is greater than turning towards the truth. And in this we cast off, and I don't think I can keep doing it, but I really do mean it, man. Like, I stand here today, and what I do, and as an epilogue to that, and I do find it funny, and I do laugh. I do laugh because it is so everlastingly comical to live in this world, in the world of contradictions, in the world where demons can be thought to not exist, when of course they do. When you look at your fellow human being, when you look at your brother, when you look at your fellow man, and he turns against himself, and we stand and we ask God, why could this be? You know, it is said that the demons are a lesser force under God. They're not necessarily above mankind. But we all stand under God's, but we do stand under the truth, and really what it is, as I weave in between being serious and not, is where we really find what is true. And the real question is, why do people turn against themselves? Why do people turn against what is true? Why are you bringing a lie around me? I refuse to allow a lie to be brought around me. You will not lie around me, because I stand here and I cast that demon out. Because I stand with the truth, and I stand as a terrible fear of the consequences of doing so. And that is how I know I am pure, because mankind will stand in fear of the consequences of doing so. And I refuse to take the consequences at the level of my soul. I do not condemn my soul to the consequences of eternal hellfire and brimstone. No, what I do is I stand with the fucking truth, because I do not want to go into that place where I pay the price. And every human being feels that way, unless there is a demon in their heart. And I believe that to be true. Why would anyone turn away